The snow fell softly on Christmas Eve 1995 in the small town of Millbrook, Vermont, blanketing the colonial houses and winding streets in pristine white. It was the kind of picture-perfect winter evening that belonged on greeting cards, where warm light spilled from frosted windows and the scent of wood smoke drifted from chimneys into the crisp night air. For the Carter family, it should have been a magical night filled with anticipation and joy. Instead, it became the beginning of a nightmare that would haunt them for decades. 7-year-old Emily Carter was practically vibrating with excitement as she helped her mother, Janet, arrange the final touches on their Christmas Eve dinner. Emily was a precocious child with honey blonde hair that cascaded in ringlets down her back, and bright blue eyes that sparkled with mischief and intelligence. She wore her favorite red velvet dress, the one her grandmother had sewn especially for Christmas, complete with white lace trim and tiny pearl buttons. "Mommy, can I put the star on top of the tree?" Emily asked for the 10th time that evening, her small hands clasped together in supplication. The Christmas tree stood majestically in the corner of their living room, a 7-foot Fraser fir that her father, Michael, had cut from their own property just a week before. "After dinner, sweetheart," Janet replied with an indulgent smile, smoothing Emily's curls. "Daddy will lift you up so you can reach." Michael Carter was running late from his job at the local lumber mill, where he worked as a foreman. The mill had been operating extended hours to meet the holiday demand, and Michael had stayed to oversee the final shipment of the year. He called at 6:30 to say he would be home within the hour, apologizing profusely for the delay. The Carter family had moved to Millbrook 3 years earlier, drawn by the town's small-scale charm and the promise of a simpler life away from the congestion of Boston. Michael had grown up in rural Vermont and wanted to raise his daughter with the same connection to nature and community that had shaped his own childhood. Janet, originally from Connecticut, had embraced their new life with enthusiasm, throwing herself into local activities and quickly becoming a beloved member of the community. Emily had thrived in Millbrook. She was the kind of child who made friends instantly, who turned every mundane activity into an adventure, who saw magic in snowflakes and stories in cloud formations. Her teacher, Mrs. Henderson, often commented that Emily had an old soul combined with a young spirit, a rare combination that made her both wise beyond her years and delightfully childlike. That Christmas Eve, while waiting for Michael to return home, Janet and Emily engaged in their traditional cookie decorating session. They had baked sugar cookies in the shapes of stars, Christmas trees, and angels, and Emily was meticulously applying green frosting to a tree-shaped cookie when she suddenly looked up with a puzzled expression. "Mommy, who's that man outside?" Emily asked, pointing toward the large picture window that faced their front yard. Janet looked up from her own cookie decorating, following Emily's gaze toward the window. The snow was falling more heavily now, creating a veil of white that made it difficult to see clearly. "I don't see anyone, honey. Are you sure?" Emily pressed her nose against the glass, her breath fogging the cold surface. "He was right there by the mailbox. He was wearing a dark coat and he was looking at our house." Janet joined her daughter at the window, peering out into the swirling snow. The street was empty except for the soft glow of street lamps creating pools of amber light on the white pavement. Their mailbox stood sentinel at the end of their driveway, but there was no sign of any person. "I don't see anyone now, Em. Maybe it was just shadows from the snow," Janet said gently, though something about Emily's certainty made her uneasy. "You know how the snow can play tricks on our eyes." "Maybe," Emily said, but she continued to stare out the window for several more minutes before returning to her cookies. Michael arrived home at 7:45, stomping snow off his boots and filling the house with his booming laughter and the cold scent of winter air. Emily launched herself into his arms, chattering excitedly about the cookies they had decorated and the presents waiting under the tree. "Did you remember to leave carrots for the reindeer?" Michael asked seriously, lifting Emily so she could hang a final ornament on the Christmas tree. "Of course," Emily giggled, "and cookies for Santa. But Mommy said we have to wait until after dinner to put the star on top." They enjoyed their Christmas Eve dinner by candlelight, a tradition Janet had established when they first married. Emily regaled them with stories from school, including her starring role as an angel in the Christmas pageant 2 weeks earlier. She had memorized every line perfectly and had insisted on wearing her costume home so she could perform the entire production for her parents. After dinner, Michael lifted Emily so she could place the gold star atop their Christmas tree. The moment was perfect, Emily's face glowing with joy, Janet capturing it all with her camera, the tree lights twinkling like earthbound stars. It was a memory that would become both precious and painful in the years that followed. At 8:30, Janet announced it was time for Emily's bath and bedtime routine. Christmas or not, 7-year-olds needed their sleep. Emily protested vigorously as expected, but eventually submitted to the ritual of bath, pajamas, teeth brushing, and bedtime story. "Will Santa really come tonight?" Emily asked as Janet tucked her into bed, her blue eyes wide with anticipation. "If you go to sleep and don't peek," Janet replied, kissing her daughter's forehead. "Santa only visits children who are fast asleep. I'll try my hardest," Emily promised solemnly. "Will you check on me in a little while?" "Of course, sweetheart." Sweet dreams. Janet left Emily's bedroom door slightly ajar, as was their custom, and joined Michael downstairs to wrap the last few presents and arrange Santa's surprises under the tree. They worked quietly, sharing the companionable silence of parents engaged in the ancient ritual of Christmas Eve preparation. At 10:15, Janet went upstairs to check on Emily, as promised. She pushed open the bedroom door gently, expecting to find her daughter fast asleep. Instead, she found Emily's bed empty, the covers thrown back as if the child had gotten up in a hurry. "Emily?" Janet called softly, assuming her daughter had gone to the bathroom. But the hallway bathroom was empty, its door standing open. Janet checked her own bedroom, the guest room, even the linen closet where Emily sometimes hid during games of hide-and-seek. No Emily. "Michael," Janet called down the stairs, her voice beginning to carry a note of concern. "Is Emily down there with you?" "No," Michael called back. "Isn't she in bed?" Janet hurried downstairs, her heart beginning to race. "She's not in her room. I can't find her anywhere upstairs." They searched the house systematically. Every closet, every corner, under beds, behind furniture, even in the basement and the attached garage. Emily was nowhere to be found. The front door was locked from the inside, exactly as Michael had left it when he came home. The back door was also locked, the chain still engaged. "Maybe she went outside to look for Santa," Michael suggested, though his voice betrayed his growing alarm. They bundled into coats and boots and searched their yard with flashlights, calling Emily's name into the snow-filled darkness. Her footprints should have been visible in the fresh snow, but the yard was pristine, unmarked except for their own tracks. At 11:25, Janet made the call that would change their lives forever. She dialed 911 with shaking fingers, her voice barely steady as she reported that their 7-year-old daughter was missing. The Millbrook Police Department responded within minutes, though the town only had 3 full-time officers and a part-time dispatcher. Chief of Police Robert Hayes arrived first, a man in his late 50s who had served the community for over 30 years. Hayes was followed by Officer Diana Walsh, a young woman who had joined the force just 6 months earlier, and Officer Tom Bradley, a 10-year veteran who knew every family in town. Chief Hayes took charge of the initial search with calm efficiency. He interviewed Michael and Janet separately, establishing a timeline of the evening's events and looking for any detail that might provide a clue to Emily's whereabouts. The house was searched again, more thoroughly this time, with particular attention to any possible exit routes. "Are all the windows secure?" Hayes asked, methodically checking each one. "Yes," Michael replied. "I checked them all when we went to bed. Emily's window is painted shut. It hasn't opened in years." The window in Emily's room faced the backyard, and like all the others in the house, it was locked from the inside. There was no indication that any window had been opened or tampered with. By midnight, additional help had arrived from the county sheriff's department. The search expanded to include the immediate neighborhood, with volunteers joining law enforcement officers in combing through yards, checking unlocked garages and sheds, calling Emily's name through the quiet streets. Janet found herself in a state of surreal disbelief. This couldn't be happening. Children didn't simply vanish from locked houses on Christmas Eve. There had to be an explanation, a simple answer that would make this nightmare disappear as quickly as it had begun. "She must be hiding somewhere," Janet kept insisting. "She's playing an elaborate game of hide-and-seek. She'll come out when she gets hungry or scared." But as the hours passed and the search grew more intensive, that hope began to crumble. Emily wasn't hiding. Emily was gone. Detective Ray Morrison arrived from the state police at 2:30 in the morning, a grizzled veteran of criminal investigations who specialized in missing persons cases. Morrison was a methodical man who approached every case with the same systematic thoroughness that had made him one of Vermont's most successful investigators. Morrison's first priority was to secure the scene and establish whether this was a case of a missing child or something more sinister. He interviewed the Carter family extensively, looking for any inconsistencies in their stories, Any hidden family problems that might explain Emily's disappearance. Has Emily ever left the house on her own before? Morrison asked Janet during their second interview. Never, Janet replied firmly. She's only 7. She knows she's not allowed outside alone, especially at night. Has she been upset about anything lately? Problems at school, fears about Christmas, anything that might make her want to run away? No, nothing like that. Emily was excited about Christmas. She's been counting down the days for weeks. Morrison also questioned Michael about his whereabouts that evening, his relationship with his daughter, any financial or marital problems that might be relevant to the case. The questions felt invasive and accusatory to the grieving parents, but Morrison had learned through experience that family members were often involved in child disappearances, regardless of how loving and normal they appeared. The investigation revealed no obvious red flags in the Carter family dynamics. Michael and Janet had a stable marriage, no history of domestic violence or child abuse, no financial problems that would suggest desperation or instability. Emily was a well-adjusted child with no history of behavioral problems or attempts to run away. As Christmas Day dawned gray and cold, the search for Emily continued with growing urgency. The Vermont State Police brought in specialized teams with tracking dogs, and the FBI was contacted about possible federal involvement. The story began to attract media attention, with reporters arriving from Burlington and Montreal to cover the mysterious disappearance. The tracking dogs were brought to Emily's bedroom first, allowing them to establish her scent. The dogs followed the scent downstairs to the living room, where it seemed to intensify near the Christmas tree. But then, inexplicably, the trail went cold. The dogs circled the living room repeatedly, whining and showing signs of confusion, but they could not pick up Emily's scent anywhere else in the house or outside. It's like she just vanished into thin air, the dog handler told Detective Morrison privately. I've never seen anything like it. The FBI officially took over the case on December 27th, bringing resources and expertise that the local authorities lacked. Special Agent Susan Carr, who specialized in child abduction cases, established a command center in Millbrook's town hall and coordinated a massive search effort that included hundreds of volunteers. Agent Carr's investigation was exhaustive. Every person who had been in contact with Emily in the weeks leading up to her disappearance was interviewed. Every sex offender within a 100-mile radius was questioned, and their alibis verified. Emily's school records were reviewed, her friends were interviewed, and her daily routines were mapped in minute detail. The case attracted national attention when it was featured on the television show America's Most Wanted, 3 weeks after Emily's disappearance. The segment generated hundreds of tips from across the country, but each lead was investigated and found to be either mistaken identity or deliberately false information. One tip seemed promising initially. A truck driver claimed to have seen a man carrying a small blonde girl across a highway rest stop in New Hampshire on Christmas morning. But security cameras at the rest stop showed no such incident, and the truck driver later admitted he had been mistaken about the date. Another tip came from a woman in Massachusetts who insisted she had seen Emily in a shopping mall with a middle-aged man who didn't seem to be her father. FBI agents rushed to investigate, but the girl in question turned out to be the man's own daughter, who bore only a superficial resemblance to Emily. As weeks turned to months, the investigation began to wind down due to lack of evidence. The FBI maintained the case as an active investigation, but the daily search efforts ceased, and the media attention gradually faded. Emily Carter became another name on the growing list of children who had simply vanished without explanation. The impact on the Carter family was devastating. Janet blamed herself for not checking on Emily sooner, for allowing her daughter to go to bed alone, for somehow failing in her most basic duty as a mother. She developed severe anxiety and depression, requiring medication and therapy to function day to day. Michael threw himself into the search with obsessive determination. He organized volunteer search parties every weekend for months, printing flyers and traveling to surrounding states to distribute Emily's photograph. He hired private investigators when the official investigation stalled, spending their savings and retirement fund in a desperate attempt to find answers. Their marriage, strong before Emily's disappearance, began to crack under the enormous strain. They couldn't comfort each other because they were both drowning in their own grief. Every conversation eventually circled back to Emily, to theories about what might have happened, to self-recrimination and desperate hope. By the first anniversary of Emily's disappearance, Michael and Janet were living like strangers in the same house. They went through the motions of daily life, but the joy had been drained from everything. Christmas became a day of mourning rather than celebration, a painful reminder of the last time their family had been whole. Janet stopped decorating for Christmas entirely, unable to face the ritual that had once brought so much happiness. Michael maintained a small tree in Emily's honor, but it stood in their living room like a memorial rather than a celebration. The second anniversary was even harder. Emily would have been 9 years old, entering 4th grade, losing baby teeth and developing her own distinct personality. Janet tortured herself with imagining the milestones they were missing: Emily's first school dance, her first bicycle ride without training wheels, her first sleepover with friends. Michael became obsessed with maintaining Emily's bedroom exactly as she had left it. He dusted her toys weekly, changed her bedsheets regularly, and kept her clothes organized by size as if she might return at any moment and need them. The room became a shrine to their missing daughter, frozen in time like a museum exhibit. Detective Morrison, though officially reassigned to other cases, continued to pursue leads on Emily's disappearance during his own time. He had never encountered a case that haunted him quite like this one. The complete absence of evidence, the impossible circumstances of Emily's vanishing, the devastating impact on a loving family. It all combined to create a mystery that defied explanation. Morrison developed several theories over the years. Perhaps Emily had been taken by someone she knew and trusted, someone who could enter the house without triggering alarms or leaving obvious evidence. Perhaps there was a hidden entrance to the house that the family didn't know about. Perhaps Emily had somehow escaped the house on her own and had been taken by an opportunistic predator. But each theory crumbled under scrutiny. Emily knew not to go with strangers, and there was no evidence of anyone she trusted being involved. The house had been thoroughly searched for hidden passages or entrances, revealing nothing. And the pristine snow in the yard made it virtually impossible for Emily to have left without leaving tracks. The case went cold officially after 3 years, though it was never closed. Emily's photograph aged progressively on missing children posters, showing what she might look like at 8, 9, 10 years old. But as the years passed, even these updates became less frequent, and Emily Carter began to fade from public memory. By 2000, 5 years after Emily's disappearance, Michael and Janet had reached a painful decision. They needed to move forward with their lives, even though moving forward felt like abandoning their daughter. They underwent marriage counseling, learned new ways to support each other, and slowly began to rebuild their relationship on the foundation of shared loss. They decided not to have another child. The thought felt like a betrayal of Emily, and they couldn't imagine loving another child without constantly comparing that child to their missing daughter. Instead, they poured their parental energy into supporting other families affected by missing children, establishing a foundation in Emily's name that provided resources and support to families facing similar tragedies. Michael left his job at the lumber mill and became a full-time advocate for missing children, speaking at conferences and working with law enforcement agencies to improve response protocols for child disappearances. His work gave purpose to his pain, transforming his devastating personal experience into a force for helping others. Janet returned to college and earned a degree in social work, specializing in trauma counseling for families affected by violence or loss. She discovered that her own experience, while devastating, had given her unique insight into the needs of grieving families. Her compassion and understanding made her exceptionally effective in her new profession. They found ways to honor Emily's memory without being consumed by her absence. They celebrated her birthday each year by donating to children's charities in her name. They volunteered at local schools, reading to children and supporting educational programs. They created a scholarship fund for local children pursuing artistic endeavors, reflecting Emily's love of drawing and storytelling. But they never forgot. They never stopped hoping for answers. And they never stopped celebrating Christmas, even though it would forever be tinged with sadness. By December 2005, 10 years after Emily's disappearance, the Carter family had achieved a kind of peace. Not the complete healing that comes from resolution, but the hard-won acceptance that some questions may never be answered. They had learned to carry their grief like a scar, permanent and sometimes painful, but no longer bleeding. Michael was now 45, his brown hair streaked with premature gray, his face lined with the accumulated stress of a decade spent searching for his daughter. Janet was 42, her once vibrant red hair now kept short and practical, her green eyes holding depths of sadness that hadn't been there before Emily's disappearance. They had developed new Christmas traditions that honored their loss while still celebrating the season. They attended Christmas Eve service at the local Methodist church. They visited Emily's memorial garden behind the elementary school, and they spent Christmas morning volunteering at the local homeless shelter. On Christmas Eve 2005, they followed their established routine with quiet solemnity. They attended church, where Pastor Williams included Emily in his prayers as he had every year since her disappearance. They visited her memorial garden, where they left fresh flowers and read aloud from the children's book that had been Emily's favorite. They returned home around 9 o'clock, physically and emotionally exhausted from the day's activities. They had planned to watch a movie and go to bed early, avoiding the painful ritual of Christmas morning altogether. But as they entered their living room, they both stopped short, staring in bewilderment at their small Christmas tree. There, beneath the sparsely decorated branches, sat a wrapped present that neither of them had placed there. The package was small, about the size of a shoebox, wrapped in cheerful red and green paper with a large gold bow. A small gift tag attached to the ribbon bore Emily's name in childish handwriting that looked disturbingly familiar. Michael and Janet stared at the mysterious gift for several long moments, their minds struggling to process what they were seeing. They had locked the house when they left for church. The doors and windows were still secure. No one else had a key to their home. "Did you?" Janet began, then trailed off. She knew Michael hadn't placed the gift there. They had agreed years ago not to exchange Christmas presents, finding the practice too painful given their loss. "No," Michael said quietly. "I've never seen it before." They approached the gift cautiously, as if it might explode or disappear if they moved too quickly. The wrapping paper looked expensive, with a subtle pattern of holly and berries that caught the light from their Christmas tree. The bow was tied with professional precision, the kind of perfect knot that retail stores used. But it was the gift tag that made Janet's hands shake. The name Emily was written in purple crayon, in the same careful block letters that Emily had been learning to write in first grade. The handwriting was unmistakably that of a 7-year-old child. "This isn't possible," Janet whispered, reaching out to touch the tag with trembling fingers. "This can't be happening." Michael pulled out his cell phone and dialed 911, his voice steady despite the surreal nature of the situation. "This is Michael Carter on Maple Street. We need police assistance. Someone has entered our home and left a package addressed to our missing daughter." Chief Hayes, now in his 60s but still sharp and dedicated, arrived within 10 minutes. He was accompanied by Officer Walsh, now a seasoned veteran herself, and 2 newer officers who had joined the force since Emily's disappearance. Hayes examined the package carefully without touching it, noting the professional wrapping and the childish handwriting on the tag. He immediately called Detective Morrison, who had retired from the state police but maintained contact with local law enforcement regarding Emily's case. "Don't touch it," Hayes instructed. "This could be evidence in Emily's case. We need to process it properly." Morrison arrived within an hour, bringing with him a crime scene technician from the county sheriff's department. They photographed the package from every angle, dusted the surrounding area for fingerprints, and carefully bagged the gift for transport to the state crime lab. "We'll open it under controlled conditions," Morrison explained to the Carter family. "If this is connected to Emily's disappearance, we can't afford to contaminate any potential evidence." The wait was agonizing. Michael and Janet spent Christmas morning at the police station, pacing the floor and imagining every possible scenario. Was this some cruel hoax perpetrated by someone who knew about Emily's case? Was it a breakthrough in the investigation? Was it somehow connected to Emily herself? Morrison called them at 2 o'clock in the afternoon with the results. The crime lab had opened the package and documented its contents thoroughly. What they found defied explanation and sent chills down the spine of everyone involved in the investigation. Inside the carefully wrapped box was a porcelain doll, approximately 18 inches tall, with blonde ringlet curls and bright blue glass eyes. The doll was dressed in an exact replica of the red velvet dress Emily had worn on the night she disappeared, complete with white lace trim and tiny pearl buttons. Every detail was perfect, down to the small stain on the dress hem where Emily had spilled grape juice 2 days before Christmas. But the most disturbing aspect of the doll was its face. While clearly manufactured, the features bore an uncanny resemblance to Emily Carter. The shape of the eyes, the curve of the smile, the slight dimple in the left cheek. It was as if someone had created a doll specifically to look like the missing girl. Attached to the doll's wrist was a small note written on expensive cream-colored paper. The message, printed in the same purple crayon as the gift tag, contained only 5 words. She wanted to come home. The implications were chilling. Someone with intimate knowledge of Emily's disappearance had gained access to the Carter home, and left this disturbing reminder of their loss. But who would do such a thing? And why wait 10 years to reveal their involvement? Morrison immediately reopened Emily's case as an active investigation. The FBI was notified and agents were dispatched from the Burlington office to assist. The doll and its wrapping were subjected to every forensic test available: DNA analysis, fingerprint examination, textile analysis, handwriting comparison. The results were simultaneously fascinating and frustrating. The doll appeared to be custom-made by a skilled craftsperson, not mass-produced. The materials were high quality, suggesting significant expense in its creation. The red velvet fabric was an exact match to Emily's dress, implying that the creator had access to either the original dress or detailed photographs of it, but there were no fingerprints on the package or its contents other than those of the crime lab technicians. No DNA evidence could be recovered from the wrapping or the doll. The handwriting on the note and gift tag showed characteristics consistent with a child's writing, but handwriting analysis was inconclusive due to the simplicity of the lettering. The investigation into how the package had appeared in the Carter home revealed nothing. There were no signs of forced entry, no evidence of lock tampering, no indication that anyone had been inside the house. The security system the Carters had installed after Emily's disappearance showed no alerts or unusual activity. Neighbors were interviewed again, but no one had seen any suspicious activity around the Carter home on Christmas Eve. The mail carrier confirmed that he had made no deliveries to their address. Local delivery services had no record of packages destined for the Carter residence. The case attracted renewed media attention, with news outlets across the country covering the bizarre development in Emily's disappearance. The story of the mysterious Christmas gift captured public imagination in a way that the original disappearance had not, generating hundreds of new tips and theories. Some callers claimed to have information about Emily's whereabouts, insisting that the doll was a message from the missing girl herself. Others suggested that the gift was the work of a serial killer who collected children and created dolls as trophies. Still others proposed supernatural explanations, claiming that Emily's spirit had somehow returned to communicate with her parents. Every tip was investigated thoroughly, but none provided credible leads. The mysterious gift seemed to have appeared as inexplicably as Emily herself had vanished 10 years earlier. Dr. Sarah Chen, a criminal psychologist consulted by the FBI, offered a profile of the person responsible for the gift. Based on the sophistication of the doll's creation and the psychological impact of its presentation, she suggested that the perpetrator was likely someone with artistic skills, significant financial resources, and intimate knowledge of Emily's case. This person wants to maintain power over the Carter family, Dr. Chen explained during a case conference. The 10-year gap suggests patience and planning. The quality of the doll indicates skill and resources. The timing, Christmas Eve, exactly 10 years later, shows a desire for maximum psychological impact. But even with this profile, investigators were no closer to identifying a suspect. The case seemed destined to join the ranks of unsolved mysteries that defied rational explanation. The impact on Michael and Janet was profound. The brief hope that the gift might provide answers to Emily's disappearance was replaced by a new kind of torment. Someone out there knew what had happened to their daughter, but they were playing a cruel game rather than providing resolution. Janet began suffering from severe anxiety again, convinced that whoever had left the doll was watching their house, might return at any time. She insisted on installing additional security measures and refused to leave the house alone. Michael's reaction was different. The doll filled him with rage rather than fear. Someone was toying with their pain, using their daughter's memory as a weapon against them. He wanted to find this person and confront them, to demand answers about Emily's fate. The doll itself presented a dilemma. The FBI wanted to retain it as evidence, but Michael and Janet felt a strange attachment to the object that so eerily resembled their missing daughter. After months of negotiation, they were allowed to have the doll photographed extensively before it was returned to them. They placed the doll in Emily's room, sitting on the bed where their daughter had slept on her last night at home. It was disturbing to see the porcelain replica in place of their living child, but it was also oddly comforting. For the first time in 10 years, Emily's room didn't feel completely empty. As 2006 progressed, the investigation into the mysterious gift gradually lost momentum. Despite extensive efforts, no new evidence emerged to explain how the doll had appeared or who had created it. The case remained open, but active investigation was suspended due to lack of leads. Morrison, now fully retired, continued to work on Emily's case as a volunteer. He had become obsessed with solving the mystery that had defined the final years of his career. He spent his retirement visiting doll makers and craftspeople across New England, looking for someone with the skills necessary to create such a detailed replica. His search eventually led him to Margaret Holloway, an elderly woman who ran a small doll-making business from her home in rural New Hampshire. Margaret was a master craftsperson who specialized in creating custom dolls that resembled specific children, often as memorial pieces for grieving families. When Morrison showed Margaret photographs of the Emily doll, her reaction was immediate and startling. She recognized the work as her own, though she had no memory of creating it. Her records showed no order for such a doll, no payment received for custom work during the relevant time period. "I made that doll," Margaret said with certainty, "but I don't remember making it. That's impossible, because I remember every doll I create. They're like my children." Margaret allowed Morrison to search her workshop and examine her records. What they discovered was deeply troubling. Margaret's workshop showed signs of use during periods when she claimed to have been away from home. Tools had been moved, materials had been used, and finished pieces had been created without her knowledge or memory. A medical examination revealed that Margaret was suffering from early-stage Alzheimer's disease, which could explain her memory lapses. But the sophistication of the Emily doll suggested that it had been created during a period of exceptional skill and clarity, not the confusion typically associated with dementia. Further investigation revealed that Margaret's workshop had been broken into several times over the past few years, though nothing of obvious value had been stolen. Security cameras installed after the break-ins showed a figure in dark clothing entering the workshop late at night, but the person's face was never visible. This discovery suggested a chilling possibility. Someone had been using Margaret's workshop and skills to create the Emily doll without her knowledge or consent. But who would go to such elaborate lengths and why? The investigation into Margaret's case led to a review of similar break-ins at other craftspeople's workshops throughout New England. A pattern emerged of small-scale thefts and unauthorized use of facilities belonging to artisans who specialized in doll making, woodworking, and textile arts. Detective Morrison theorized that someone had been systematically accessing these workshops to acquire the skills and materials necessary to create the Emily doll, but the identity and motivation of this person remained completely unknown. As the second anniversary of the mysterious gift approached, Michael and Janet faced another difficult Christmas season. The renewed investigation had brought back all the pain and uncertainty of Emily's original disappearance, but it had also provided no resolution or closure. They had learned to live with Emily's absence, but they couldn't learn to live with the knowledge that someone out there was playing psychological games with their grief. The doll sat in Emily's room like an accusation, beautiful and disturbing in equal measure. On Christmas Eve 2006, exactly 11 years after Emily's disappearance and 1 year after the gift's appearance, the Carter family prepared for another somber holiday. They had increased their security measures and asked police to patrol their neighborhood more frequently, but they couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. As they returned home from their traditional Christmas Eve activities, they approached their house with trepidation. Would there be another gift waiting for them? Another cruel reminder of their loss? The house was dark and silent, exactly as they had left it. No mysterious packages waited under their Christmas tree. But as they turned on the lights and settled in for the evening, Janet noticed something that made her blood run cold. The Emily doll, which had been sitting on Emily's bed when they left, was now positioned in the living room chair that had been Emily's favorite. The doll had been moved, arranged carefully as if it were watching television, its glass eyes fixed on the Christmas tree. Neither Michael nor Janet had moved the doll. The security system showed no alerts. There were no signs of intrusion anywhere in the house. Yet somehow the doll had been repositioned while they were away. This time they didn't call the police immediately. They both understood that there would be no evidence to find, no explanations that made rational sense. Instead, they sat in their living room, staring at the doll that looked so much like their missing daughter, and tried to make sense of the impossible. "It's like she's trying to tell us something," Janet whispered, her voice barely audible in the silent house. Michael nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving the doll's eerily lifelike face. "But what? What is she trying to say?" As if in response to his question, a sound drifted through the house, the faint melody of a music box playing Silent Night. The sound seemed to come from upstairs, from the direction of Emily's room. Michael and Janet looked at each other with a mixture of fear and wonder. Emily had owned a music box that played that exact song, a gift from her aunt that had been one of her most treasured possessions. But the music box had been in Emily's room the night she disappeared, and it had never been found. They climbed the stairs slowly, following the gentle melody to its source. Emily's room was exactly as they had left it, except for one thing. Sitting on the nightstand beside Emily's bed was a small wooden music box, its lid open, its tiny ballerina spinning slowly as Silent Night played in the quiet room. The music box was identical to the one Emily had owned, down to the small scratch on the lid where she had accidentally dropped it the previous year. But this couldn't be the same music box. That one had vanished with Emily 11 years ago. As the melody wound down and the ballerina's dance slowed to a stop, Michael approached the music box with trembling hands. Inside the lid, written in the same purple crayon as the previous year's note, was a single word: remember. But remember what? What message was being conveyed through these impossible gifts and mysterious appearances? The answer, when it came, would be more disturbing than anything they could have imagined. But for now, Michael and Janet Carter stood in their missing daughter's room, listening to the echo of a melody that shouldn't exist, holding a music box that couldn't be there, and wondering if their grief had finally driven them beyond the boundaries of sanity. The mystery of Emily Carter's disappearance had taken a new turn, leading into territory where the rational world collided with the impossible, where love transcended death, and where the truth might be more terrible than the most frightening fiction. And somewhere in the darkness beyond their understanding, the person responsible for these manifestations continued to watch, to plan, and to orchestrate a revelation that would shatter everything the Carter family thought they knew about the night their daughter vanished into the winter snow.